propeller head.
Start.
Lubna, will you let us know when? Because I don't know if our screen changes to let us know.
Countdown.
You are live. You're okay to start in like 2 minutes.
All right, I see us live. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll give you guys a couple minutes to join because we're still a little early. I know RCM is known, mashallah, for being on time, but early is good too. We just don't want to start too early, but Assalamu alaikum everybody, welcome. Well, please give you a moment to get logged in. And our panelists, you guys can all hear me okay and hear each other, hopefully?
Yes.
Awesome. It feels weird starting early. Should we just go ahead and start? I don't know.
Give me 2 minutes, Iba. I'm trying to get it on the website. So just give me 2 minutes.
Okay. We can chat if you guys want. So no one's
Yeah.
not just awkwardly we're not just awkwardly looking at each other on our little Zoom screens. But anyway, I'm just glad you guys are all able to make it. We have a new addition to our panel that wasn't on our original advertisement. So hopefully we'll get everybody excited to welcome Jeff Atkinson today, but we'll get into introductions in a moment. But hopefully you guys are all doing well on this toasty Sunday. It was so hot. I don't know about you guys, but today was hotter than I've seen it for the last few days. It's gotten kind of, I think with the sun, a little, the humidity was getting to me earlier.
Starting to look like August in Georgia.
Oh, yeah. I thought we got lucky though. This summer hasn't been as bad overall.
You're right. It hasn't.
So hopefully we didn't jinx ourselves with just getting some good, not too bad heat, but we'll see. Still have a little bit left of summer.
Well, and I think right now the kids are at a pinnacle of stress because they're getting ready to start school in 2 weeks, and it's just such an unknown right now for them.
I know. We start actually next week in Cobb. So
right. So some people are starting next week. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really crazy to me. I mean, August 2nd is their first day, and that's basically the middle of our summer back where I grew up in Michigan. Like that was, we still had another month because we'd start after Labor Day, and it's like,
right.
It doesn't feel like summer's coming to a close, but school's starting.
Yeah, school is starting.
Yes.
But that's exactly why we're here to talk about, now that we're in back to school here in Georgia, our community is kind of out of, just complete virtual, transitioning to a hybrid model with schools. And now we're going back to in-person possibly. So just conversations about just issues in relation to school and with our youth in general with regards to mental health and anxiety. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Hopefully Lumna's all set with her setting it up on the website.
You're good to go. Yep.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's start then officially. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully we will have a fun and productive discussion. Also casual, please feel free to post your questions on the Facebook live stream. The comments will be the questions and the comments will be read and included into our conversation. At the same time, we have an esteemed panel that will have a lot to share, and we will benefit from their experience and their expertise. I will give them the floor to introduce themselves. I just want to kind of give you a brief idea of what we're here to talk about. As we mentioned, we're back to school, a lot of anxiety, not just with the kids in that transition, parents as well, especially since we're still in a pandemic world. I think it is not necessarily a traditionally discussed topic when we talk about mental health in a Muslim community. It's not something I grew up discussing growing up in the US. And I think this needs to change, because obviously no one is immune to having, concerns or mental health kind of care. Needs to be something that needs to be a conversation and a topic of discussion, and not something shunned and stigmatized, because everybody has to deal with it. We all do. I mean, just like we deal with our physical health, this is something we need to discuss and kind of all have a common understanding about how best to approach it. Everyone has, sometimes we're all feeling alone, but suffering from the same kind of concerns and, depression potentially, or whatever issues, we might be going through. So it helps to know we're not alone, and it helps to know there are experts out there that are out there helping us and our kids. So here we are, hopefully starting one of many conversations. Inshallah, we'll introduce our panel, and you can reach out to them directly after this if you want to continue the conversation. But we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll have our panelists introduce themselves, and we'll start with Dr. Laura Badwan. You want to start us off?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Habib. Thanks for having me, guys. So my name is Dr. Laura Badwan, and I am a pediatrician here in the East Cobb area. I work at the local practice, and I've been doing pediatrics for almost 20 years now. Started off in the hospital-based setting, and then have moved over to more of the outpatient setting. This is a very timely discussion. The panel and I were talking before we started. This was a problem before COVID, anxiety and depression in the community, and it's just been amplified since the pandemic started. So I think it's great to kind of start the conversation rolling within the Muslim community, and hopefully provide some resources and tips for families and the kids.
All right, thank you, Dr. Redwan. I must add that she's not just an amazing pediatrician because she's our pediatrician, but because she's my neighbor and friend. And so you guys are going to love hearing from her. I'm positive this is going to be amazing. So we have also Mr. Ihab Jalil. You want to introduce yourself?
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for this opportunity. So my name is Ihab Jalil. I am the executive director for Amana Academy Charter School, one of the Fulton County charter schools. And we, I think, navigated through the pandemic very well last year, having done mostly remote learning for half of the year, and then switching over to a hybrid model mid-year. And we learned a lot from that experience about our students, about our staff, about ourselves. And I'm eager to share whatever we learned through that experience, and just looking forward to coming back face to face. And that poses new challenges for us. So looking forward to sharing whatever I know. And also wanted to just mention that we're part of a network of schools called EL education schools. Used to be called Expeditionary Learning. It's a Harvard-based model that really focuses not just on the mastery of knowledge and skills, but also on character of students and the social and emotional support that they need, in addition to high quality work as well. So we've learned a lot from that relationship and that network of schools. And so whatever I can share from there, that'll be helpful too. Thanks.
Thank you, Ihab. I know you're really, really busy. So even on a Sunday, I'm sure you've got other things going on. So we really appreciate your time. And then last but not least, we have our guest, Jeff Atkinson. Please go ahead and introduce yourself, Jeff.
Sure. I'm Jeff Atkinson. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I practice in the Alpharetta area. I've been licensed since 1997. I have lots of different specializations, but one of them is working with people that have been faced with trauma And I've learned a lot of different ways to help them deal with stress over the years. But also, stress is on a continuum. So, I also see kids that might not even really fit a mental health diagnosis, but just are more stressed about, some of the things that we're all dealing with right now in the pandemic. And so I've definitely seen an increase in that, I think for one thing, families have had more time to really look at their kids. And I mean, that sounds kind of strange, but, when we're all busy and we're all working out of the house, we don't have as much time until we're like maybe at the dinner table or something, but having everybody together, I think parents have had a little more time to just kind of get to know their kids better. And there's more of a connection where they see, oh, well, my kid's a little more stressed. They're not sleeping as well. They're not eating as well. Maybe I'll get them some help. And so, that's been great to be there for them. So I'm here to try to impart some assistance with that. And also I'm a parent, with the 16 and a 19-year-old boys. And so some of us, have been even in the community that you're in, have all been through, the kids have the same grades and gone to the same schools, and we've been through some of the same trials and tribulations. So, I think that, sometimes really gives you more experience than anything, just being a parent. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for your time. I know this was a last minute request on my part, but I'm so grateful that you accepted and that all of you are all able to join us. And I encourage everybody watching live, please go ahead and post your questions. This is a discussion and not a lecture. And hopefully you'll have some things and perspectives to contribute and some tips as well as listeners. I did want to start the conversation off just to get everybody's hopefully attention, because I think a lot of people, myself included, think, well, we all go through stress, and our kids maybe, they have their ups and downs. They stress when there's like a test at school or, whatnot. How do I know what to look out for? How do I know if there's an issue? I don't, necessarily assume that just because they're stressed that there's a problem. What can I do to identify concerns, and how can I prevent them? So I feel like this might be something good to start us off with, just because I don't want people out there to assume that just because their kids aren't having, or themselves, maybe some extreme, exhibiting extreme symptoms, that would definitely alert them that there may still be something that we can do to help our children and ourselves out with this mental health question. So go ahead and you guys jump in.
Well, I think, if you don't mind, I think one of the biggest things to make sure our kids are talking about what's going on in their lives. And so, of course, it would be best if they could start with talking with their parents. And so, having that flow of communication is so important. And if you see some kind of change in that, then that's one sign right there that maybe something. Now, if they're going through some type of different, developmental stage where maybe they are pulling away from their parents a little more, we want to make sure that they have that support system, and whether it's another family member, or maybe it's a responsible member of the community, a religious leader or somebody, but we need to make sure that they're talking to somebody. And so if you see them isolating, you see them, kind of being to themselves, when they're going through all this, one of the things that I try to do with my clients is try to figure out what in the stress in their life, what is controllable and what is not controllable. And so when you have things that are uncontrollable in their life, so the pandemic, right now they're getting ready to face, this whole new thing, this whole new idea of going to school together, so, they really haven't done that for a while. So there's all these things these worries probably that they're having, make sure that they're having, one of the things that research says to help with that is just to be able to talk about it. When we're dealing with uncontrollable stressors, the first thing research says is to, you need to be able to talk about it. You need to be able to express it. So, make sure that they're talking. And so, the warning sign again would be, are they isolating? Are they, less energetic? Are they just pulling to themselves? And so if there's some, just more agitated and things like that. So we want to, if you can't make the connection and the communication isn't there, then you need to try to build that communication around them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to echo what Jeff said. I think it's really important. Mental health encompasses a lot of different things. So, the most common ones that we hear about all the time are anxiety and depression. And while some of the symptoms that you might see your child or yourself even exhibit can kind of be similar, there are a few differences that, between the two, but you really are looking for, with regards to anxiety, are they having like a recurring fear all of a sudden? They don't want to go outside. They don't want to play with friends, a fear that maybe wasn't there before. And it just, is reiterated multiple times. Sometimes it can manifest in physical complaints. Are they always complaining of, man, my tummy hurts, I don't want to go to school, or my head hurts, I don't want to go to school? Are they having trouble sleeping? Or conversely, are they sleeping too much? Maybe they used to do so well and could sit down and read a book, and now all of a sudden they're having some difficulty concentrating. Just fear of being separated from the parents. It used to be, oh, my kid was a social butterfly, and now they're no longer doing those things. So those are some of the symptoms that you can see with regards to anxiety, and things that we can keep an eye on as parents, right? The child isn't going to come up and say, hey, I'm anxious. Maybe some kids are. And for certain things, anxiety is totally healthy and normal, right? We all have anxiety sometimes. I think when it gets the best of us and it keeps us from doing our daily activities, living our life, then that's when it, raises a red flag where, what, I think maybe we need to kind of look into this a little bit more. With regards to depression, similar. And, again, some people might think, oh, these are low numbers, nobody suffers from these. In the United States, at least, anywhere from 8% and some statistics as high as, 20% of lifetime prevalence of these illnesses within our youth. So we do need to take them seriously, right? That's almost as high as 1 in 5 kids are going to be affected by this in one shape or form. But, you can see sadness and irritability. They can just seem burnt out. I mean, I think a lot of adults are feeling that way now with COVID, being more indecisive, just thoughts maybe of wanting to harm themselves. Like maybe you hear them say, now like, oh, I wish I would die, or, oh, I could just, kill myself. Those types of words that in passing, you might think, oh, they're joking, they don't mean it. But in this type of world that we're living in now, it's good to put your real listening ears on and take those types of statements seriously. And then with our little ones, because it is hard to tell, like if your, young ones are anxious, if they become very fussy or more irritable, or their behavior changes, those are some of the signs and symptoms overall to look out for. And then you can talk to your pediatrician, and we have tools to kind of work through those diagnoses.
You mentioned something interesting, and I think it is important to look out for these signs with our kids, but it may be a little harder when it's ourselves that are exhibiting some of these potentially anxiety or depression. And it's almost more difficult, I think, to internalize and really reflect on whether we're just sad because of stresses at home, and this is just within the realm of normal, or if we need to do something to beyond just, kind of feeling our feelings kind of thing. So I don't know what you guys have maybe some experience in helping us identify when our, emotions are normal and we're well adjusted and we don't really need to do anything differently, or if there are red flags that we need to look out for amongst ourselves as adults and caregivers as well.
Well, you haven't said anything yet.
Well, that last question was, I think, directed more at adults than children. So I want to defer to the experts on that one. I know
Well,
how I deal with stress, but
well,
I don't think I'm the
so,
expert.
so with parents, I mean, that I work with, I mean, it's all about self-care, and because um, unfortunately, this sounds terrible, but raising your kids, a lot of it is uncontrollable stress for you because you don't have control over these kids as much as you'd like to a lot of times. So you have to take care of yourself. You have to make sure you're eating well. You have to make sure you're getting good sleep as much as you can, getting your activity, having some fun in your life. So give back to yourself, rejuvenate yourself, because yeah, if you let yourself get worn down, and then if you do have, of course, mental health issues on top of that, then that just projects onto the child, and that's going to be, really hard for them. I mean, I remember when my kids were young, and I remember my oldest looking at me once and saying, "You have such a kind face, Dad." And then I remember later on when I was more stressed about raising them, "Wow, Dad, you just seem stressed all the time." So I mean, it's not good to let yourself get run down. So and I'm sure all of us here have done that from time to time. So we're sometimes we let that happen, and then we got to take care of ourselves.
Well, and I want to definitely piggyback on that and really reinforce what Jeff said around projection, adults projecting onto their children, because that's something I do see at the school. When adults come in and they're stressed out and they're trying to, have a discussion with a teacher or with an administrator, if they're stressed out and they're projecting it, you can see it on the child's face. You can see that after that adult leaves, after that parent leaves, that child is still stressed, and it can go on for a lot longer than people may think. Yeah, I find myself sometimes having these kinds of discussions with adults, with parents, and so some of the same things that Jeff is talking about, we discuss that people have to take care of themselves too. Absolutely.
So what do you do? Yeah, you said you already know what you do to de-stress. What's your?
For me, it has a lot to do with things like hiking. I think connecting to nature is huge for me. Everybody has their thing. It could be going to a concert, it could be going, being out with friends and so forth. I love reconnecting with nature, hiking, and if I can do it socially with other people, it's even more fun. But that really rejuvenates me in a big way, and so that's my thing: adventure and connection to the natural world.
I think it's really important that we remember that these breaks that we need, these mental breaks, don't have to be these long, expensive vacations, right? It could be as much as telling your spouse, like, I need 1 hour to just kind of leave the house and, either go for a walk or wander the aisles of Target, right? I mean, it could be something as simple as that. So we don't have to look at it as, oh, well, I don't have time to take a vacation. That's not really what we're saying, but there needs to be time out of each day where you feel that you can unwind as a parent and have your own, me time.
Yeah, and I would say, the example I use, for example, Laura, I think to your point, like I don't have to go, to Yellowstone Park to go hiking. I can do that at the Roswell Mill, and it's just beautiful over there. So you're absolutely right. It doesn't take a lot of time to do that. I do want to go back, Hib, if you don't mind, to the question that you asked earlier about tests and so forth. And I think that I just want to, depending on how much time we have, I just want to share something that came out of an article that I read recently. I could share it in the chat box, but I think it's important that children know that they know that we believe in them. I feel like that's incredibly important. So, in terms of like being prepared for a test and that anxiety that happens, frankly, right now, the conversation in education is to de-stress people around testing. And there's a new conversation happening around standardized testing. Are we testing kids too much, and so forth? And I'm very pleased to see that that's the conversation that people are having, especially going back into school after this pandemic. But they need to know that we believe in them, and parents, and I'll defer to the counselors here, but I feel like parents need to be coaches. They need to coach, and coaches believe in their players, and they coach them throughout the process. It's not just something that they say once in a while, or that it's heartfelt. It's actually demonstrated through their actions. And so if a parent is in touch with the teacher, knows when that test is going to happen, they can ask non-threatening questions of their children to say, look, that test is a week out from now. Is there something I could do to help you for it? So that it's not, a last minute kind of anxiety thing. I think there's a lot of ways that parents can prepare their kids for those moments, those stressful moments, so that it's less stressful. But let's face it, I mean, taking a test, I mean, nobody, I think, looks forward to tests. So it's a natural thing that there is going to be some level of anxiety, and that's why we're being tested. But I think we can coach our kids to prepare them, for any of these kind of milestones that are coming up. We just have to be involved, and it starts to show them that we believe in them. It's not like a gotcha, where I don't know if you're going to really do that well on that test. It's got to be encouraging and giving them the tools and connecting them to the teacher if they're not, having regular conversations with the teacher about what their challenges are. That the highest level of learning for a human being is when you can reflect on your learning, and you start to understand how you learn, and what speaks to you in terms of learning. It's not the memorization of things. And so the more and more we can get children to think critically that way, they will be able to start to be able to manage their expectations and really build those habits of scholarship that they need to be prepared.
And to that point, and Jeff, you can probably also talk about this more when we talk about anxiety and we think about ways to kind of help with the anxiety, right? We talked about the de-stress and taking time out, but a lot of times when I'm chatting with some of my patients about it, a lot of it's kind of visualization and planning ahead, right? Like think about what that day is going to be like and plan in advance. If I'm going to give a big talk, then I want to plan ahead of time, especially if I know I get a little anxious about it, right? I want to think about that day. I'm going to walk out on the stage. I'm going to be at the podium and visualize, do I have everything I need? And so it's almost like when you get to the point where you're doing it, you've already been through it once or twice in your mind. And I know maybe it sounds silly, but I think that helps as well. And I don't know, Jeff, if that's something that you all counsel about or.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that's so challenging as a parent is that you can know these things that will help your child, but they may be shut down from really wanting to listen to you about it. And so it's sometimes it's all about the timing, but absolutely. I mean, visual imagery and visualizing success for yourself. And, so if a kid, I mean, one of the things that I tend to do with my parents is we talk about the whole concept of, parents tend to fall in that helicopter, drill sergeant, and consultant mode, right? So, and we all can kind of be in those areas, but, so we don't want to be the helicopter parent all the time, because then we're rescuing our kid from things. And we want to be the consultant. We want to, hey, what's going on today? Well, I'm stressed out. I got these tests. I got all this stuff going on. Hey, you want to talk about it? You want some suggestions? So you're offering this, you're consulting with them, you're offering some help, and they may be not ready to hear that right. They may just want to vent for a minute. Mm-hmm. Have to kind of let them vent and then try to circle back. I have a parent that has this term of what she does with her kids. She orbits. she just kind of orbits them and tries to like find the right time. And, that's hard for us parents that are very, if we're working and we don't have, seem to have that time. We want to just, hey, come on, let's go. And, some kids are great with that. They want to learn from their parents, but let's face it, sometimes they're just not in the mood or whatever. So, you have to find that right time. But absolutely, if you can get them to understand that concept of visualizing, I mean, that's one of the ways that I try to impart that onto my kids. Most of the kids I work with, they enjoy some type of sports. So, that's sports psychology. So, you talk about the studies where, hey, you have two groups of basketball players equally matched. This one group, they tested their free throw ability, and they tested them all. And then so one group didn't even touch a ball. All they did was visualize that they were shooting the ball into the basket. And the other group just did regular practice. The group that got better, the group that visualized, and they're just blown away, like, what? So now if you use that concept with, oh, I'm taking tests, I'm giving a speaking engagement, whatever, you can use the same type of, same type of technique. So.
Yeah, you're making me think, guys, about, we've got school coming up next week in certain districts, in a couple of weeks in others. And for some kids, they've never, like kindergartners, first graders, they've never been, some of them haven't even been to school yet. Right. So
Right.
I think, driving them to the school,
Absolutely.
just driving around the school and saying, to your point about visualization, it could be, well, right now it's empty, but when we come that first day of school, it's going to be very crowded. There's going to be a lot of folks. It's going to be kind of festive and fun, and just starting to become familiar with the space of school and the physical space. I think I don't know. I think that would be really powerful, and even things like sleep habits. Starting to talk to kids about, let's so that it's not like that night before. But I am curious to know. We can say these things, but Jeff, to your point, sometimes kids don't want to hear it, or they're just not going to respond to that, and they may not want to go to the school in the car and so forth. So that's an area that I would love to hear about. Like, how do you convince them that this is value added, that this is something that we should be doing right now?
Well, so I think a lot of times you try to get them to join in some type of conversation out there really, really young. Maybe it's more, hey, what would be great is if we went and did this and then we got an ice cream after or something. There's nothing wrong with a little ice cream to sweeten the deal. But, with the older kids, you try to get them to join in some type of discussion about, what would be some ideas that would help the situation, and you introduce that, and hopefully, they will pick up on that, and or you might give them some choices of things to do, and one of them be, hey, what about going to the school? And then say, well, what would be one of these things that you'd like to do today to just get more acclimated and ready? And they would say, all right, well, I'll go by the school. Okay.
Yeah. A lot of times I like to say we give kids choices without really giving choices. Like I may say, we're going to go to the school, and I was thinking we could either go at 10 or 11 or 12.
Very good.
And you tell me what time works best, right? And so then they can feel like they have a say in their destiny, and in the end, you're going to where you all want to go. But I do want to say, I think that the orientations for school, especially if your child is an anxious child, is so important. Take advantage of the school orientations, walk the hallways, make sure they go through, like if they're in middle school, and I have a middle schooler now, we're going to walk through that hall. We're going to go to all of his classes multiple times. He's going to feel more comfortable when school starts on Monday that, hey, I've been here. It's familiar. I've met the teachers. There's not a lot of new stuff, that's going to scare me on the first day. I think definitely try to take advantage of those if you have an anxious child.
I do have a quick follow-up, because I'm really curious to hear your perspectives. I tend to have, especially as I've become an adult, I have a little bit more anxiety than I used to when I was a kid, and I was more carefree, younger. My daughter's is trending kind of in the same direction, where she's really anxious as well, with change especially. And my the advice that I was given is, yes, visualizing positive outcomes obviously would be great, but sometimes I take it to the other extreme where we say, okay, yes, this is going to be hard. Let's imagine the worst case scenario. Let's imagine the worst possible thing that can happen. And it's not as bad as we really think it can be. Like, I think part of our problem when we're worried about something is that it just seems so big in our head. Then when you like verbalize it, it's really not that bad. So I don't know if I should just focus on the positive and stop, walking that path down the, those, kind of spiraling out of control tends to get really bad when we start thinking about what could happen. And yes, maybe it is a scary thing going back to school, but that's how we've been doing it lately, where we just like, okay, let's, yeah, it is a scary thing going to, let's say, middle school from elementary. It's a whole new world, but what's the worst possible thing? That kids won't talk to you, that your teacher is going to be mean, or you're going to be overwhelmed by all the homework. I mean, as an adult, I feel like that helps me. So I don't know if this is a good strategy as well.
Well, I mean, that's part of the conversation. And I think that's an important part of the conversation. Just, try not to fall into the pattern of when you ask them and they say, oh, well, yeah, so I'm not going to, my friends aren't going to talk to me and the teacher's going to be mean. And you're like, oh, that's not going to happen. You kind of have to listen to them and just be like, yeah, that's going to be really tough. You're right. And then the overall message, but you're going to get through this. Mm-hmm. So as a parent, sometimes we try to minimize that real quick, just like, nah, you'll be fine with that, but just, try to sit with them with that, that's a lot of anxiety. We can see where you're stressed about that. But I think you're going to get through this. And
can I just say that I think I think I'm older than the folks that are on the call, but for my generation, growing up in the 70s and 80s, we were just kind of thrown into stuff. I don't even know if they were having this kind of conversation about, re-entry to school or anything like that. We were immigrants, and my parents basically, our house was walking distance to the school, so we were walkers, and there was no orientation. Like, we just walked down the street, and we were in the school, and we were, we I don't know how we figured it out, but I don't think that's the recipe for success. The way that my experience growing up in upstate New York, I wouldn't want to repeat that, because I think I could have been much more successful at school if I had, supportive teachers and parents who felt comfortable going to the school, and they were welcomed into the school, and there was a conversation about, how can we set these boys up for success, as my brother and I. But I got to admit that, I sometimes have to take myself out of, many times outside of my own experience, and say, it's a different time, and we really do need to set these kids up for success. It may not have been the way that I was raised or the way that school happened back in the 70s and 80s, but it's a different time, and there's plenty of research to show why the way that things are working now is much better than in the past.
That's a really good point, actually, because when we were talking earlier about helicopter parenting as a millennial, I think we tend to fear that, and we want our kids to be independent, and so we're more hands off. But I learned the hard way that actually kids need us to be there, whether we don't necessarily have to be directly involved in, like, mark their assignments on our own agendas for ourselves to keep up with. But as I think we tend to kind of have a little bit of nostalgia when we look back, and we're like, well, we made it out fine because, and our parents weren't as involved, and look at us, like, we were able to figure it out. And I mean, that's true, but we could have been maybe potentially even more successful in what we're doing. So I don't know. I feel like we tend to look back and say, well, if we figured it out, we don't need to be overly involved in our own kids' academic career, and we'll let them kind of sink or swim type situation.
Well, and I think it's a much more complex world right now. It really is. I mean, we grew up at a time where I think things were just so much simpler. There was 3 channels on TV. There was no social media or an internet or World Wide Web, and so your circle of interactions with society and other people was just much smaller, and so it was I think it was manageable. It was more manageable, and so I just wanted to mention that to everybody, because I think a lot of times we put ourselves in our children's place, and I think it's a mistake. We really need to look at this much more objectively.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And you brought up a few other things that definitely need to be discussed when we talk about anxiety and depression and mental health in general. I mean, in this world, we have the internet now, we have social media, all different forms of it. And if you think about back in the day when we went to school, you would go to school, you would be with your friends at school, and then you would come home and that's it, right? Maybe you would have a play date or two with your friends outside of school, but that was the extent of their influence on you. And now when you think about the children that have social media, have access to their phones, their friend influence is seeping into the home. And so now there is no family time, school time, friend time. It's all a blur. And so we really have to be careful about thinking, yes, it's how when I went to school, they'll make it out the same. It'll be good. There's just different factors now that are coming into play. And I think that plus the fact that we are looking into it more, we're more open with dialogue about mental health. I think that's why we're seeing such a rise of anxiety and depression in our society. And it's something that we need to kind of be mindful of, and not to kind of take this a different way, but specifically with regards to phones, social media, be cautious about when you introduce those things to your child, right? Have a conversation about what your expectations are regarding their use, what's going to happen to them when it comes home. They're going to be put away. They're not allowed in the bedrooms. And encourage your children that anyone that they befriend on social media needs to be somebody that you know in person. I think those are ways that we can kind of control without like showing them it's too much control, but control that environment a little bit more and kind of prevent some of the pressures that they might have from the social media influence.
Well, yeah, and one of the things that I was talking with one of my mentors about recently was just what he was calling the epidemic of sleep deprivation for kids these days, and just what it ends up masking, just it ends up looking like a lot of other things like ADD or something like that. But it's a lot of times these kids are just not getting enough sleep because if you let them go to bed with their devices, it's not great. I mean, they may end up being on the device for much longer than you thought. So, they're getting a much shorter window of sleep, and it's just affecting everything for them. So yeah, the internet safety is so important. I, could tell you all sorts of stories of poor kids that have gotten into things that they shouldn't have and didn't mean to, but, especially with just the overall health and just being able to, not only have better sleep, but like you're saying, Laura, with the, knowing who your kids are connecting with. There's just such a problem with the cyberbullying, it's just, it can be very passive aggressive kind of stuff. It might not be outright like, terrible things that they're saying, but it's just enough to keep them upset about things about themselves. And some people just like to have that kind of control over people. And so if that's the last thing that this person is hearing at the end of the day is that, somebody said they were fat or something like that, they go to bed with that and they sit with that, and then they don't, they may not reach out to you, and you may, if you're not knowing what's going on. So can't be too careful.
Can't be too careful. Absolutely. The new recommendations are to wait until 8th meaning wait until 8th grade to give your child a cell phone. Obviously, it's going to be child dependent and family dependent based on what the needs are of the child and of the family. That, you know, is that child being dropped off a lot and the parents need to connect? Is that happening earlier? You know, that's a discussion that needs to happen within the family. But just recognize that no, not every child has a phone when they get into middle school right away. Not every child has access to social media. So when your child comes to you and says, well, everybody else does it, that's not a true statement. It may feel that way, but you can say, I recognize that, and we'll find ways for you to connect with your friends in other ways. But, you know, let's wait a little bit, and then you can save yourself and your child a lot of heartache, as opposed to introducing it too early before they're ready for that.
Yeah, and there's so much here that I just absolutely love hearing. Just there's some of this is just going back to basics on certain things. You know, sleep, proper sleep. I will tell you that when we have children at the school who act out on a consistent basis, and then it bubbles up to my level, like where it's escalated to my level, a lot of times what I find out is that the sleep habits are really not where they need to be. I mean, I just start asking questions, and usually it's another administrator in the room or a counselor, and a parent will say, well, I can't get them to sleep before 10 o'clock or something like that. Well, when that's repeated day after day after day, and children are coming in with 5 hours sleep, it's just not healthy. I mean, and so there's just no routine at home to help them kind of have that soft landing, you know, an hour before this kind of, you know, regular routine. And if it starts at an early age, the benefits just are amazing. And so, yeah, I for those parents that are online, I just can't tell you how important it is to establish good sleep routines and good rituals at home, that you know, kids are in pajamas an hour before they have to go to sleep. They have to brush their teeth a half an hour before, and there's this kind of, like, you know, almost checklist that happens, and then it's time to go to sleep. And you know, I reading to kids at night, having the ritual of reading to your kids. You know, at our school, we have a no homework policy from kindergarten to second grade, because all the research says that homework during those grades really doesn't impact student learning. But what does impact student learning is reading to your kids, reading with them, and having them practice their reading and develop their literacy skills. So just having that as part of the ritual, it's really a back to basics kind of approach, but it works. And so, you know, having dinner together as a family a few times a week, if it's possible, you know, so that you know what's happening in your child's life and so forth. I see that those families that are doing those things are able to cope with some of these other stressors a lot easier. And I may be painting an idealistic picture, but at least it's something that we can strive for.
Yeah, 100%. I think routines, anytime you can establish good routines in the home, whatever those routines are, it is always one of the top things that we recommend. Whether we're dealing with anxiety, depression, attention deficit disorder, we always start with establish some structure, some routine to the day, that, you know, when your child comes home from school, they know that the backpack goes here. I'm going to have a snack. I have 15 to 30 minutes of downtime, maybe another 30 minutes of like some homework time, and, you know, that they know what's happening. Because if every day is different, then it becomes chaotic. And, you know, to your point about the sleep, I'll never forget a patient that was coming in because they were saying their medicines weren't working for ADHD. And, you know, we got more of a history, and I said, well, you know, here it says you're only sleeping like 5 hours a night. I said, I don't care what medicine I give you, you're not going to be able to focus at school if you're not getting a good night's sleep. And that is why we kind of talk about the treatment of some of these things being multi-approach. It's not just let's throw a medicine on here, or even let's talk to a therapist. It's, you need to get sleep, you need to limit your screen time, you need to eat healthy, you need to get regular physical activity, all those things that people are like, what? That doesn't make sense. But that all plays a role in the mental health, and we have to remember that.
Yeah, Hiba, I think, the audience is, predominantly Muslim. And I do think that it's important to build on what Laura said in terms of therapists. If your child needs help, there's a stigma in our community, frankly, about seeking assistance from a therapist. And I can tell you that, for those families that I'm aware of that are taking advantage of a therapist, it works. They have somebody that they can talk to, that can be objective, can look at it from an outside perspective. Sometimes that involves family therapy. It's not just the individual, because sometimes parents are enablers for certain behaviors, and brothers and sisters and siblings and those types of things. I think, in our community, I'll just say that, in the last 2-3 years in particular, this has now become a topic that people are willing to talk about a lot more than they were before, right up from the Friday sermons to other venues and so forth. And I'm so encouraged by that, because it means that, to your point earlier, somebody had made the point about there's physical health and there's mental health. And just like we seek professionals for our physical health, we should seek professionals for our mental health as well, so that we can be 100%.
Yeah, no, this is really amazing. I'm actually taking notes so I don't forget, because I think it's really important. These tips have been really invaluable, and hopefully I'm glad we're recording this. So hopefully later, if we do forget any tidbit, we can remind ourselves, and then also contribute to the conversation. Again, continue, guys, to post your questions. We'll have opportunities hopefully to continue this conversation. I think everybody's really brought up important points, and you're right. I think as in the Muslim community, the reason maybe, and this is just, again, a lot of it is because it is stigmatized, but at the same time, I think the emphasis on mental health being necessitating, like really having the necessity to seek a professional, doesn't necessarily invalidate our faith and our spirituality. It's not mutually exclusive. Just because I'm seeing a therapist doesn't mean I'm not praying properly, for example. So I think people tend to say, well, if you're depressed, it's because you need to pray and be better, in your rituals, as far as our faith is concerned. And that is obviously part of what we believe as Muslims to be part of our mental health care package, if you will, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't, beyond that, seek, just like we would seek physicians' help for a physical problem, to seek professionals and mental health concerns as well. And I do want to mention this, because I know we keep talking about our children, but we should set an example for our kids, and not necessarily only getting them help, but also ourselves as adults, whether individually or with our spouses if we're married. A lot of us have issues at work, and we don't know how to properly address them or navigate our own emotions. And some of us think it's our boss's problem, and they quit their job thinking that's thinking that the boss is kind of externalizing their issues. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of it has to do with how we ourselves deal with problems, and so I think to set an example for our own children, and being able to not just externalize and blame our environment, and maybe take it in and say and empower our own selves and handling our personal issues, whether it's with our again, spouse or our parents or whatever stresses we have in our lives, and kind of tackling them head on, and rather than just kind of saying, okay, well, life is life, and we can just hopefully pray through it and get through it. But that's not, I don't think that's how even Islamically we are taught to approach our problems. It's very interesting to see, and unfortunately, as a, again, minority community, as a Muslim community, we've seen unfortunately, that we are more vulnerable to mental health issues. So not only are we not addressing it, but we're also potentially even more likely to have these issues, just given the fact that we, because of Islamophobia or whatever, environmental issues we're dealing with, our youth especially are most vulnerable. There was a recent article published in JAMA, and I shared it with you all on the panel earlier, that showed that basically rates of suicide potentially are higher in the Muslim community. And that unfortunately is something that is not helped by the fact that we don't talk about it as far as how to address it amongst our youth. So I'd love to hear more about that, about particularly how to prevent, kind of this conversation from going forward, how to best address it. It's been really enlightening, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I do agree with you. I think in the Islamic faith, we tend not to talk about mental health. And when we do, it's usually centered around spirituality, just like you discussed. You need to maybe go to the mosque more, you need to pray more, you need to, spend more time with God. And, from a spiritual sense, I like the way you said the package. Yes, that is all true. But there's also other aspects to it that we do need to take into account. And I really appreciated that you sent that information from the JAMA article. And just so people out there know what the statistics were, they basically surveyed almost 3,000 people about their reports of suicide attempts within their lifetime. And about 8% of Muslim people responded that they have attempted suicide at least once in their lifetime. And that was almost twice as much as any other religious group. And so, we could probably have a whole nother week-long seminar about why that's the case. But we do know that after 9/11, there's been a lot of pushback against Muslims, and, Islamophobia has been on the rise, especially in those last several years, dealing with travel bans, and that, re-amplifies, are we welcome here? Are we not welcome here? Are we safe here? And so those things are churning through the minds of adults, and also they're being absorbed by the kids that are hearing us talk about it, seeing it happen out, in their streets. And I think the first step in kind of destigmatizing all of this is dialogue, having these conversations and making sure that if it's happening, that don't be ashamed to talk to your friend about it. It's okay. You can say, I think my kid is just getting really anxious, or I think my kid is depressed and I feel like I need to seek help. You never know what someone else might be going through, and just being able to open up about those experiences is the first step, I think, to really achieving long-term success in treatment.
Well, and I mean, I'm so interested in, I definitely appreciate you sending that study. I'm so interested in finding out more about why that is. This could be a totally wrong, but it just kind of brings up, in not too long ago, I was looking into suicide and rates, and I think the highest rate of suicide in the world was in South Korea, where, and it was attributed to basically kids that were, and I'm talking about for children, and it was attributed to kids that were so focused on getting into a university that, and they might not get into the right university, they'd, work and work and work and work to, their whole lives to, they're going from, and I know we don't do all this in America all the time, but I mean, there is some families that really, tend to push their kids, and maybe not too, maybe they don't realize they're pushing them a little too far. And I'm not trying to sound like you can't push your kids. You have to find that balance, but there tends to be this shame that kids carry with them if they don't, get that approval from their parents. And a lot of times you might not even know it's not that they're depressed. It's not, maybe there is some anxiety, but if they feel ashamed, that shame can be so strong, and it can be a very impulsive thing for them to just take their life. So, again, it's all about communication. It's about parents, being in touch with their kids, and, we want to see them push themselves and do the best that they can do. But, we have to be careful not to push too hard, and sometimes that's us putting our values on them too much. So yeah, I just wonder how many of those suicides are, related to, just academic pressure and just fears of that. I don't underplay that there is the Islamophobia as well that's playing into that.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a really good point. When we look at depression and the associated risks for depression, educational underachievement is, kind of at the top of that list. And so whether it's true underachievement or a perceived underachievement because you're not meeting expectations that have been set, I think those things play a role in it, as well as poor relationships with your family members or your friends. And so again, that could be based off of, expectations that just aren't aligned. And then one other thing, we haven't touched on it, but I do want to bring it up: alcohol and drug use. I think a lot of times in the Islamic faith, we feel like, oh, we don't have to worry about that. It's against our religion. So none of our kids are, drinking, and none of our kids are doing drugs. But that is not the case. And so we need to be mindful of that. We need to keep our eyes and ears open. Now that we have, marijuana legalized in many areas, even if they began smoking weed a little bit more, you can start seeing some academic underachievement. You can start seeing some of these things that we've been talking about, these symptoms. So we just need to be aware that these things, being a Muslim does not exempt us from any of these things that we are seeing within the society we live in, and just keep that in mind. I think you're on mute, Hiba. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I had a visitor earlier. I don't want I don't want you guys to hear. My brother's dog just. Anyway, so a lot of us tend to be in denial about these issues, thinking just, obviously everybody knows that we're not allowed to drink, so therefore our kids won't drink, and therefore they're not going to be. But there's just so much we need to, I think, almost just come to the point where there's an expectation that everybody around you's, maybe doing something. Let's just kind of start from there and say, okay, hopefully you're not, but let's just have a conversation so that, we can address it. Realistically, I think, more than anything. And another point, I kind of wanted to just mention this real quick, because we always talk about communication being key, but I noticed when you have multiple children, sometimes we feel like, oh, we sat down at dinner together, we do it every day, therefore, we have no problems communicating because we're always together all the time, especially during COVID. I mean, we were together almost too much, but I think for us with multiple kids, I think communicating is most effective when it's one-on-one, because there are some topics that, one sibling won't want the other to know about, or concerns that they might have. And just knowing them as individuals, I think, is really important. I learned that also the hard way, so I wanted to mention it. We did have a quick question from our comments on Facebook. I wanted to ask the panel, a lot of our parents that have younger kids that missed some school in person, especially young kids that really couldn't make the most out of academics virtually, younger, like first grade, 4 to 5 years old. They're concerned that they're behind with, learning how to read and write, and they just want to know if there's anything they could do to address this concern that, that their kids may be behind because they haven't been in school in person for a couple of years.
I'm gonna say one comment about that, and then I'm gonna lay it at the hands of Ihab. But I just want to remind parents that in America, we start our kids' school early, but there are many places around the world that do not even start school until the age of 7. Mm-hmm. So I think keeping that in mind in terms of socialization and, reading and writing, as long as we're doing things at home, reading to them, allowing them time to be creative, I think that's important. But Ihab, I don't know if you have other things about this topic.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think that, parents sometimes have this like map of this roadmap of that their kids from first grade all the way up to 12th grade, and this is the career they're going to get into, and so forth. And I tend to find that a lot of times it's those parents that have the most concern around some of these questions. We have to just recognize that we've all gone through a pandemic, and it's still going on. And this is, you've heard this term over and over again. These are unprecedented times. And I know that we all want to make up for learning loss, but there was this great article written by Ron Berger in The Atlantic. He's the chief academic officer for expeditionary learning for EL education. And the title of the article is "Our Kids Are Not Broken." And I think that that's really important because there was this sense, about 6 months, maybe a year ago, that kids have had so much learning loss, that they're in social and emotional stress, that they're coming back to school broken somehow. And we can't look at it that way. The approach that he's advocating is that we take almost like a physical therapist type of approach and become very personalized with each child and say, look, what areas do I need to strengthen in this child? So if my elbow got hurt in an accident, a physical therapist is not going to look at my entire body. They're going to focus in on the elbow, and they're going to say, how do we make your elbow stronger? And so I think that that's the way we've got to look at it. And certainly there are things that parents can do from a tutoring perspective or something else. But I think right now, going back into school, the most important thing they can do is to help their kids acclimate to school, to feel like they belong at school, have a good relationship with the teachers that their children are interacting with, and just ease their kids back into school. And just like Laura said, read to your kids. If they're struggling in math or something like that, work with them on it, and just like a physical therapist would. But let's not overstress the children. Kids are very resilient, and when I look back, I came when I came to America, I was 1 year ahead in the Middle East, and so because of my age, they brought me back a year. Um, I'm 54 right now. Like that 1 year, who cares? It had nothing to do with my ability to get into a really good college or whatever. It was the best thing they could have done to put me back a year. I'm not saying that we want to do that wholesale for all children, but let's not over analyze this, thinking that a little bit of learning loss that may have happened in math or in English is somehow going to close the door for our children to get into the type of college that they want to, or the type of program that we want them to get into, and so forth. So I think we just have to be we have to work at this in small pieces, and really partner with our teachers, and understand that the teachers are under an immense amount of pressure right now. Teachers are coming back into the schools. Most of the children that are going to be in the school are unvaccinated, right? Because they're elementary school students in particular. So teachers are under a lot of stress too. They've been having to do a lot of work. Parents have been partnering with teachers. We're all going back into school, and it's high anxiety. What we need to do is just ease ourselves back into it. And I'm not trying to really minimize the situation or anything like that, but being stressful is it's not gonna help our children. So let's reestablish their social well-being, their social connections with other children, and then look at those specific areas that they need help with, and help them strengthen those areas. They're not broken.
I actually look at this in the other way. I see it as a positive thing when you instead focus on the fact that our children are learning how to really maximize their potential and be resilient, and learn how to maneuver around uncharted territory in in a stable way. Kind of understand that we're going to be having to deal with problems in our life as we get older, and how do we navigate around these problems, and to learn it at a young age with our parents and coaches and our teachers around us. I think this is a learning experience that is invaluable, that I think
Yeah.
if we
Well,
maximize the potential, it's amazing.
You're bringing up a great point, and that Ron also brought up. And there's all this research around grit, and that Angela Duckworth has done, a professor in the Philly area. And the thing is that our kids have learned a lot in the last year. They've learned how to use different tools, online tools. They've learned different ways to become resilient, to your point. And so we can't come into this with a deficit mentality.
Mhm.
We have to think about it in terms of what are the assets that we have. We have children that have navigated this very well, and they've been, I'm really proud of the kids, in fact, in terms of what they've been able to accomplish. And so again, going back to the earlier point about, like, we need to believe in our kids. Our teachers need to believe in them, and we need to believe in them. And so we need to be rooting for them. And to the extent that we can, help them ease back into school, they're just going to take off after that. That's really my belief.
That's awesome. I'm really optimistic, and you guys have, I mean, this has been invaluable, and I hope everybody has an opportunity to listen to your tips. I want to give you all one last opportunity. We're right around 7 and we have to wrap up, but I want to give you guys a kind of a closing remark. And then before I close out, I want to mention we will be emailing out this video to the community. It will stay online on our RCM Facebook page. Where you can, again, continue the conversation if you choose. But also we'll be sending out some resources for parents and for individuals looking to continue the conversation and continue to educate themselves on what they can do to help promote mental health. And as we ease this transition, hopefully back to school for our kids, I think that will be very useful. And again, I want to take a moment again to appreciate our panelists, our very busy panelists who've taken time off on their day off, hopefully to share with us their wisdom, and really this has been invaluable. Again, hopefully the beginning of many conversations. So I'll close off on my end. I appreciate this as a parent. I want to give you guys a chance to give me your last, hopefully anything that you might have wanted to say that didn't get a chance. Hopefully this is a good time. Go ahead, guys.
One thing I wanted to say.
Go ahead.
I would be remiss as a pediatrician if I didn't kind of tack on to what Ehab was saying. The pandemic is still with us, okay? We are going back to school, but what we want to do is to make sure that our kids are able to stay in school. So let's do our part to try to help make that happen, right? So if you're eligible, if you're age 12 and up, please get vaccinated. If you have not been vaccinated, please wear a mask. And actually, those of you that are vaccinated, if you're going to be in large groups, please continue to wear a mask if you don't know what the vaccination status of other people around you. Continue to keep your distance, wash your hands. Those same principles apply. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. And I think we know that kids do better when they're in school. And the idea is we want to keep them in school. So these are ways that we can help to do that, okay?
I just want to wish everybody luck and just enjoy this last bit of your summer before the school starts, and visualize success.
Yeah, and I think I've spoken plenty, but the only other thing that I would say is that, as administrators, I can tell you, I can speak for other administrators when I say we're grateful to parents for partnering with us and our teachers through this last year and a half. We know that you've had to do so much more work in terms of educating and your children with us, and we're going to have to continue to partner and continue to co-create what the next looks like in terms of education. And so stay involved, stay engaged with your schools, and just understand that everybody has the best interests in your children, and that to the extent that we can partner, we're gonna come out even stronger. So I really appreciate this opportunity, and I learned a lot from Laura and Jeff today. So I just want to say thank you guys too for this opportunity. Thank you, Heba. Really learned a lot.
Well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for your time as listeners and the panelists, and hopefully we'll see you next time, guys. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.